I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capital Views. Andy Mack, Commissioner of Natural Resources, is with us. Andy, welcome.
Thank you.
Andy, you're in charge of developing our state's resources. And one of the problems we've had over many years is access, getting access to the land's resources. And I know since last year, your department has been involved in some pretty innovative planning for resource roads and community access roads on the North Slope. And maybe you could just touch on that and tell us where it's at.
You know, Tim, last year we actually started a program we call A-Star. And it was a result of conversations that we were having with local stakeholders on the North Slope who were really focused on community needs and the cost of bringing goods and services in and the ability of people who live in those communities to leave and go and, for instance, travel to Fairbanks by road. And so we developed that conversation to the point where we've been working with those local communities to plan for corridors that would allow both communities to transit in and out of that region. And we think there's a strong secondary benefit too, and that is to bring down the costs of doing business in that region and hopefully also at the same time provide the level of control that those communities want when it comes to what's going on around their communities.
And we're speaking of villages on the North Slope, for example, within
Correct.
the NTRA.
Correct, yeah. You know, we've had lots of conversations with the North Slope Borough in particular and the mayor of the North Slope Borough, Harry Brower, and he and the governor engaged in a long conversation about what the needs were. One of the things that's happening up there that everybody recognizes is that the ice road system, which has been very reliable for a number of years, continues, that ice road season continues to shorten, and it has become more difficult to use those roads for industrial purposes. One of the things that was important is that whatever we did, you know, we were able to, like I say, bring down the cost of doing business in those communities and bring goods and services into those communities.
Now, so your agency would initiated in the planning.
Yes.
And where are we with that process?
So we dedicated $7.5 million to this proposition, and that was that we would actually go and work with communities to get better plans to establish corridors and design some of the systems. This doesn't pay for the actual construction of these systems, these roads. One of the things that we did is we worked with the North Slope Borough, and we plan to, as soon as possible and hopefully this winter, do a snowpack road between Barrow and what is Dead Horse. And so it will open up that area in the NPRA, which has historically been only available for roll-a-gons and for over-tundra travel, which is dangerous, in particular if it's not in an industrial setting.
A snowpack road, how long would that road be?
It would be about 150 miles long.
Yeah,
and
who would build it, Andy?
The North Slope Borough has actually appropriated money. They've actually, I should back up, they've requested the permits and they're in the permitting process, and they've also appropriated money through the North Slope Borough to actually construct that road. You know, it usually uses most of the natural snow on the tundra. It packs it down, but it allows larger vehicles that can carry equipment or goods to the communities on those roads.
What is there an estimated cost of it?
They already had a budget, and they supplemented their budget by an additional $2 million. And so they're committed, and we're working with them to see that happens.
And the next step after that would be, I mean, in terms of the permanent road network, we'd be talking gravel roads. Is there gravel resources out there?
We're doing a lot of work around assessing the gravel availability along the route. And frankly, in rural Alaska, in many cases, the roads run right by the gravel sources. In fact, you identify your gravel sources before you actually build or design the road route. So we're in the process of doing that. We actually have selected a contractor that we're working with now in generating that type of information, because gravel is a scarce resource in many areas of Alaska, believe it or not. We seem to see it everywhere, but then in certain cases there's not a lot of it. In this case, there's not a lot of it.
Andy, when it gets to the point that a road would be built, who would build it? Could the North Slope Borough build a road?
One of the plans, or one of the parts of the A-Star program, is that we would look at different funding options. And there's a potential that the North Slope Borough, through its bonding capacity, and they have a port authority there, and they have bonding capacity to fund this type of infrastructure. And so that's definitely a possibility, and they're looking at that, and we're looking at that now.
Is there also, well, there's also the MPRA impact funds. That could be a source, couldn't it?
It potentially could be. It might take a small tweak in the law to allow using impact funds for a road. We're looking at that issue right now.
This is a share of the royalty from production that would go to the state and to an impact fund for the North Slope communities.
Correct,
Yeah.
right. And now that it looks like there's going to be increased production, you know, that particular funding source is going to grow and be a significant amount of money. Historically, there's been some good lease sales that have generated some money, but in other years it's not a tremendous source. But it is a potential funding source.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, bit by bit, we're sort of connecting up these regions. You know, when you think back on it, when was the last road that we built in Alaska of substance was the Parks Highway in the 1960s.
Right. Right.
And well, there was the Klondike Highway connecting Skagway, but the Canadians paid for that.
Right.
So they could use it.
It's been a while, and we're pretty focused on that. You know, we are as a state in a situation where we don't have a lot of capital funds to put towards these roads, but we've seen some commitments on the Eisenbeck Road where we've committed state funds. We think that's an important health safety issue for the community of King Cove. We've seen a discussion, which we've been listening very carefully to, about road access to the Upper Kobuk Mining District.
Yeah.
And there's support for that statewide. There's communities there that are very concerned about those impacts. And so we're talking with folks about that as a possibility as well. And then there's, of course, the Arctic piece, which is A-Star.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. We, you know, I want to correct myself. We have built a new road. It's the road to Tanana.
That's true.
It falls just short. It's a rough pioneer road. It falls just short of Tanana.
Right.
And it rises to the Yukon River, and that was an initiative by Governor Parnell.
Right. And we're trying to get the final permits for that bridge to cross the river, which would extend, you know.
But that's going to be an expensive undertaking.
Yes, it will be.
But a piece at a time, we're connecting Alaska.
Yes.
Well, Andy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tim.
Andy Mack, Commissioner of Natural Resources. I'm Tim Bradner. Thank you for joining us at Capitol News.